Hello, before we start, I need to ask you something. Have you ever been alone in a forest so vast that you could scream for hours and nobody would hear you? Where the trees are so dense that daylight barely reaches the ground. And at night, the darkness is so complete it feels like a physical weight pressing down on you. Most people visit Montana for the beauty, the mountains, the wildlife, the endless wilderness. They don't know what that wilderness contains. They don't know why we have rules about midnight calls. If you enjoyed this story, I'd be thrilled if you'd hit the like button and subscribe. It helps me continue sharing my experiences from places most people never see. And if you've had a strange experience in the wild, write it in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. My name is Daniel Frost. I've been working as a forest ranger for Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks for 14 years, primarily in the Northwest region, covering areas around Flathead National Forest, the Glacier Back Country, Whitefish, and Columbia Falls. 3 million acres of wilderness, most of it roadless, most of it empty. We have grizzly bears, wolves, mountain lions here. We have terrain that can kill you in dozens of different ways. And there's one more thing, something not found in any wildlife management guide. The Midnight Rule. I learned about it my first week on the job, though I didn't understand it then. My training officer was a woman named Catherine Mills, 26 years with the service, weathered and taciturn in the way that career wilderness rangers often become. We were driving back from a routine patrol when my radio crackled to life at 11:47 p.m. Unit 19. We have a distress call from the Swan Range. Hiker reports being lost, requesting immediate assistance. Last known coordinates. Catherine reached over and turned the radio off. I stared at her. What are you doing? Someone needs help. It's almost midnight, so that's when people need help most. They've been lost all day. They're panicking. We don't answer calls past midnight. She said it flatly, like stating a fact of nature. Not in this region. Not unless it's an absolute emergency with confirmed visual contact and multiple witnesses. A lost hiker is an emergency. Catherine pulled over to the side of the forest road and killed the engine. In the sudden silence, I could hear wind moving through the pines and something else. A distant sound that might have been an animal or might have been something trying to sound like an animal. You're new, so I'm going to explain this once. Pay attention. She turned in her seat to face me directly. For the last 30 years, this region has had a pattern. Between midnight and 4:00 a.m., we received distress calls. Lost hikers, injured climbers, people claiming to be stranded. The calls sound legitimate. The voices sound terrified, but here's the thing. When we respond, one of three things happens. Either we find nothing at the coordinates, or we find something that used to be a person but isn't anymore. Or she paused. We don't come back. That's ridiculous. You're telling me you just ignore people who might be dying. I'm telling you that whatever makes those calls isn't people. Not anymore. She restarted the truck. In 1997, we lost 2 rangers responding to a midnight call. Found them 3 days later, 5 miles from where they were supposed to be, hanging from trees they couldn't possibly have climbed. Medical examiner said they'd been dead for at least a week, but we talked to them on the radio the night they disappeared. Heard them screaming, heard something else screaming back. I wanted to argue, wanted to insist she was hazing me or exaggerating, but the look in her eyes stopped me. She believed every word, so we just let people die. The ones who call after midnight are already dead, Daniel, or they're not people at all. Either way, going after them just adds to the body count. She pulled back onto the road. There are protocols. If we get a call after midnight, we log it, get as much information as possible, and wait until dawn. If it's legitimate, we'll find them in daylight. If it's not, she didn't finish the sentence. Over the next few months, I learned the other rules. Unofficial protocols that had been passed down ranger to ranger, written in no manual, but followed religiously by anyone who'd worked the region for more than a year. Rule 1. Never answer distress calls between midnight and 4:00 a.m. unless you have direct visual confirmation of the person in distress. Rule 2. If you hear your name called in the forest after dark, don't acknowledge it. Don't even turn around. Whatever's calling isn't someone who should know your name. Rule 3. If you find a campsite that's been abandoned with food and gear still present, don't touch anything. Mark the location, retreat, and report it at dawn. Rule 4. Never follow animal tracks that transition from 4 legs to 2 or 2 legs to 4. Turn around immediately. Rule 5. If you encounter someone in the wilderness who won't look directly at you, who keeps their face turned away or hidden, do not approach. Do not offer help. Leave the area as quickly as possible. Rule 6. Trust your instincts over your training. If something feels wrong in a way you can't articulate, that feeling is more reliable than any checklist or procedure. Rule 7. Some areas are marked on our maps with small red dots. These zones are off limits after sunset for any reason. No exceptions. The dots don't appear on public maps, and we don't explain them to civilians. We just enforce the boundaries. I thought they were being paranoid, superstitious old-timers clinging to campfire stories. Then I had my first midnight call. It was late October, 3 months into my first season. I was working a solo patrol in the Swan Range. Not ideal, but we were short-staffed and it was supposed to be a quiet night. Just checking on a few backcountry campsites, making sure everyone was following fire regulations. At 12:14 a.m., my radio crackled. "Help!" A woman's voice, breathy and desperate. "Please, I need help. I'm hurt. I can't walk." I grabbed the radio. "This is Ranger Frost. What's your location?" "I don't know." I fell. "It's dark. I can hear water nearby like a creek. Please, I'm bleeding. Please come." Every instinct I'd developed as an EMT before joining the Ranger service screamed at me to respond. Someone was hurt. That's what the job was, but Catherine's words echoed. "Never answer calls past midnight." "What's your name?" I asked. "Silence then." "Sarah. Sarah Mitchell. Please, it hurts so much." "Sarah, I need you to stay calm. Can you describe your surroundings? Any landmarks? Trees? Just trees and an eyes. I keep seeing eyes in the dark, moving, circling. Please hurry." My training said go. The rules said wait. I made the worst possible choice. I compromised. I drove to the last known area where hikers had been reported that day, a trailhead near Jewel Basin. I wouldn't go into the forest. I'd just get close, use my spotlight, see if I could locate her from a safe distance. That seemed reasonable. The trailhead parking lot was empty except for one vehicle, a blue Subaru with Washington plates. I ran the registration, came back to a Sarah Mitchell from Seattle. The inside of my chest went cold. Maybe the call was legitimate. Maybe I was about to save someone's life. I grabbed my medkit, my spotlight, my radio, stepped to the edge of the forest. The trees here were dense old growth that had never been logged. The kind of forest where you could be 10 FT from the trail and become completely disoriented. "Sarah," I called. "Sarah Mitchell, this is Montana Fish Wildlife and Parks. I'm at the Jewel Basin trailhead. Can you hear me?" For a moment, nothing. Then from deep in the forest, "Yes, yes, I can hear you. Please, I'm so scared. They're getting closer. Who's getting closer? I don't know. They look like people, but they move wrong. Their joints bend wrong. Please help me." Against every warning I'd been given, I stepped onto the trail, just a little ways, just far enough to scan with the spotlight. My light cut through the darkness, illuminating tree trunks and underbrush. "But no, Sarah, keep talking, Sarah. I'm trying to locate you. I can see your light. I'm north of you, maybe a quarter mile. There's a rock formation shaped like a face. Hurry, please hurry." I knew that formation. I'd hiked past it dozens of times during training. It was accessible, not too far off the main trail. Maybe this really was legitimate. I moved deeper into the forest, spotlight sweeping ahead of me. My radio crackled every few seconds with Sarah's voice guiding me, urging me forward. The trees grew thicker. The trail became less distinct. I checked my GPS. I was a half-mile in now, and the rock formation should be just ahead. Then I saw her. A figure stood next to the rock formation, feminine in shape, wearing what looked like hiking clothes. Her back was to me, head bowed, arms hanging at her sides. "Sarah," I called. She didn't turn, didn't move, just stood there perfectly still. I approached slowly, hand on my radio. Something felt wrong. The way she was standing, too rigid, too unnatural. And now that I was closer, I could see her clothes weren't quite right. The colors seemed faded, the style dated, like she was wearing gear from decades ago. "Sarah, can you hear me?" The figure's head tilted, but she still didn't turn. When she spoke, her voice came not from her, but from somewhere else in the forest, from multiple directions at once. "I can hear you, Daniel. I can always hear you." She knew my name. Rule 2 screamed in my mind. If you hear your name called in the forest after dark, don't acknowledge it. I started backing away slowly, keeping my light on the figure. That's when she turned. I don't have words for what I saw. It had Sarah Mitchell's face. I'd seen her driver's license photo and this was her face exactly. But everything LSC was wrong. The neck bent at angles that would require multiple breaks. The shoulders sat unevenly like the bones underneath had been rearranged. And the eyes were completely black. No whites, no iris, just endless dark reflecting my light back at me like an animal's. "Don't leave," it said in Sarah's voice, in my radio's voice, in a chorus of voices speaking slightly out of sync. "I need help. You came to help. Don't leave me again." I ran, crashed through underbrush, branches tearing at my face and clothes, my spotlight swinging wildly as I sprinted back toward the trail. Behind me, I could hear it following. Not running, not making any normal pursuit sounds. Just a rapid clicking like multiple wooden joints snapping back and forth, back and forth. I made it to my truck, slammed the door, locked it, even though I knew that wouldn't matter. Sat there with the engine running and the high beams flooding the trailhead, watching the forest edge. Nothing emerged, but I could see movement in the trees, shapes that were almost human that flickered in and out of the beam's reach. And from my radio, still clipped to my belt, came Sarah Mitchell's voice. "Why did you leave? I'm still here. I'm still hurt. Please come back." I threw the radio into the passenger seat and drove away faster than I should have. Didn't stop until I reached the ranger station 30 m away. Catherine was there working late on reports. She took one look at me and knew. Midnight call. I nodded, unable to speak. "You went after it," another nod. She poured me coffee, sat me down, and waited while I told her everything. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. "Sarah Mitchell disappeared on that trail 6 years ago," she finally said. "We never found her body. Her car was at the trailhead. Her gear was on the trail, but no Sarah. Eventually, we had to call off the search." She paused. "We've gotten calls," in her voice, "at least a dozen times since then. Different rangers, same voice, same story. Whatever's out there, it's using her somehow. Using what's left of her. What is it? We don't know. Something old, maybe something that's always been in these forests, or something that was human once and became something else." She looked at me seriously. "Did it know your name?" "Yes." "Then you're marked. It'll call you again. Maybe not for months, maybe not for years, but eventually it'll use your name. When that happens, you don't answer. You don't react. You pretend you never heard it." She handed me a small cloth pouch. "Keep this with you. Sage and cedar blessed by a Salish elder. Might not do anything, but it can't hurt." I took the pouch, feeling ridiculous but also terrified enough to try anything. "Why don't we warn people? Why don't we close those areas? We do warn them in our way. We mark hazardous areas. We enforce regulations. We do what we can. But how do you tell someone don't hike here because something that wears human faces might get you? How do you put that on a warning sign?" She shook her head. "The wilderness is dangerous. People accept that. But this is something different, something that shouldn't exist. And the moment we officially acknowledge it exists, everything changes. So we follow the rules and we hope it's enough." That was 7 years ago. Since then, I've had 3 more midnight calls. Each time, I've followed the protocols. Each time, I've survived. But I've also watched as other rangers, good people, experienced people, broke the rules and paid for it. 2 years ago, we found a ranger named Mike Patterson hanging from a tree near Lake McDonald. He'd responded to a midnight call alone. The rope around his neck was made from braided human hair. The medical examiner found DNA from 17 different missing persons in that rope. Last year, a ranger trainee named Jennifer Lopez disappeared after a midnight call near the Chinese wall. We found her 3 months later, or what was left of her. She'd been scattered across 15 mi of wilderness. Her body parts arranged in a pattern we couldn't decipher, but that made everyone who saw it feel profoundly wrong, like the pattern was communicating something our conscious minds couldn't process, but our Hindi brain understood perfectly. The midnight calls continue. Sometimes it's voices we recognize. Missing hikers, dead rangers, people who disappeared decades ago. Sometimes it's voices we don't recognize but that know our names, our fears, our secrets. And sometimes, worst of all, it's the voice of someone we know is still alive, someone safe at home or in town. And we have to resist the urge to respond even as we hear them begging for help in our radios. We follow the rules. We don't answer after midnight. We mark the red dot zones and keep people away. We do our jobs in daylight and retreat to safety when darkness comes. But sometimes when I'm alone in the station late at night, I hear my radio crackle even though it's turned off. And I hear voices calling my name. Different voices every time, but always the same message. Daniel, we're still here. We're still waiting. Eventually you'll answer. Eventually everyone answers. They're patient. They have nothing but time. And they know that eventually circumstances will force someone to break the rules. A real emergency, a child in danger, someone we can't walk away from. That's what they're counting on. That's what they've always been counting on. The thing about working in wilderness law enforcement is that most people think the job is about enforcing fishing regulations and helping lost tourists. They don't understand that in places like Montana, vast, ancient, largely unmapped, your real job is managing the boundary between civilization and whatever exists in the spaces humans abandoned or never fully occupied. After my encounter with the Sarah Mitchell thing, Catherine became my unofficial mentor in the aspects of the job nobody talks about. She'd worked the region longer than almost anyone, had seen patterns emerge over decades, had developed instincts that kept her alive when others died. We were having coffee at a diner in Whitefish one morning when she pulled out a topographic map covered in hand-drawn annotations. "These are the red dot zones I told you about," she said, pointing to dozens of small marks scattered across the wilderness. Each one represents an area where we've had repeated incidents, disappearances, anomalous calls, rangers who came back changed. I studied the map. The dots seemed random at first, but the longer I looked, the more I noticed they weren't evenly distributed. They clustered around certain geographical features. Deep valleys, old mining areas, places where multiple wedges converged. What makes these spots different? We're not sure. Some of the elders from the Salish and Kootenai tribes say these are places where the barrier between worlds is thin, places that were avoided traditionally because bad things happened there. The mining boom of the late 1800s and early 1900s disturbed a lot of these sites. People digging deep, blasting, changing the landscape. Maybe they opened something. Maybe they woke something up. She traced her finger along a particular cluster of red dots near the Bob Marshall Wilderness. "This area is the worst. We've lost 11 rangers here over the years. The last one was 5 years ago. Veteran named Raymond Cooper, 30 years of experience. He knew all the rules, followed them religiously. Then one night he got a call from his daughter. Real daughter, not a mimic. She was camping in the Chinese Wall area with friends. Said something was circling their campsite, making sounds that shouldn't come from any animal. What did he do? What any parent would do. He broke protocol, went in after midnight, didn't wait for backup, didn't follow procedures. We found his truck at the trailhead, found his gear scattered along the trail for about 2 miles, never found Raymond." She paused, "but we still get calls in his voice. Usually right around this time of year, late fall, when the season's winding down and staffing gets thin." "You're saying it knew. It knew how to get him to break the rules." "That's exactly what I'm saying. These things, whatever they are, they learn, they watch us, figure out our patterns, our weaknesses. They know love is stronger than fear. They know duty compels us, so they use those things against us." She folded the map. "Raymond's daughter quit camping after that. Moved to Seattle, won't come back to Montana. Last I heard, she still gets calls on her cell phone, sometimes late at night. Her father's voice begging her to come find him." The conversation stayed with me. Over the following months, I paid closer attention to the patterns, started keeping my own log of incidents, comparing them with historical records, talking to old-timers who'd worked the region before the official rules existed. What I found was disturbing. The midnight calls had been happening for at least 100 years, maybe longer, but they'd evolved. Early reports from the 1920s described strange lights in the forest, voices calling for help that led trappers and loggers into dangerous terrain where they fell or got lost. Simple, direct. By the 1950s, the phenomenon had become more sophisticated. Calls would come over early radio systems, mimicking specific people, providing detailed information that suggested intelligence and planning. Rangers started keeping unofficial records, warning each other, developing the first versions of the rules. The 1980s brought a sharp increase in incidents, coinciding with improved radio technology and increased backcountry recreation. The things making the calls adapted, learned to manipulate technology better, became more convincing in their mimicry. Now in the 2020s, they were using cell phones, GPS coordinates, social media. They knew our names before we entered the forest. They knew our families, our histories, our fears. They were learning faster than we could adapt. I brought my findings to Catherine. She listened, nodding occasionally, unsurprised by most of it. "You're seeing what I've been seeing for years," she said. "Whatever's out there is intelligent and it's patient. It can wait decades for the right opportunity, the right person to break the rules." She poured more coffee. "You know what scares me most? We're not sure if it's one thing or many things. Whether there's a single entity orchestrating this or if there are multiple predators, I guess, competing for territory. How do we fight something we don't understand? We don't fight it. We contain it. We follow the rules. We keep people out of the red zones as much as possible, and we accept that sometimes people are going to die." The bluntness of her words was jarring. "That sounds callous, I know, but this job isn't about saving everyone. It's about minimizing casualties. And the best way to maximize casualties is to charge into the dark every time something calls for help." Winter came early that year. By November, we had 3 ft of snow in the high country and minimal visitor traffic. Most of the seasonal staff had been laid off. It was just a skeleton crew. Me, Catherine, 2 other year-round rangers, and a handful of maintenance workers. That's when things escalated. It started with equipment failures. Radios would turn themselves on at night, cycling through frequencies, picking up voices that shouldn't be there. Voices speaking in languages nobody recognized, or speaking English but with the words in wrong order. Sentences that sounded normal until you really listened and realized they didn't mean anything. Were just word sounds strung together to approximate communication. Our GPS units began showing phantom locations, coordinates that would appear, persist for hours, then vanish. When we investigated in daylight, we'd find nothing at those spots, or we'd find things that shouldn't be there. A car of stones arranged in a spiral pattern. A circle of dead trees, all fallen, pointing inward. Once we found a campsite that looked decades old, with rusted equipment and rotted gear. But when we ran the serial numbers on an old Coleman lantern we found there, it came back as equipment that had been purchased 3 months earlier. The midnight calls intensified every night. Multiple distress calls from different locations, different voices. All between midnight and 4 a.m. we logged them, followed protocol, ignored them. But it was taking a toll. You can only listen to people begging for help, screaming in terror, crying in pain for so many nights before it breaks something inside you. One of our rangers, a younger guy named Travis Hoffman, started showing signs of cracking. He'd respond to the radio calls even though we told him not to. Would grab the mic and try to talk the victims through their situations, give them advice on survival. We told him to stop, that he was just feeding whatever was on the other end, giving it more information about us. Then came the night of December 15th. I was at the main station working late on budget reports when every radio in the building went active simultaneously. Not just our frequencies, all of them. Emergency services, highway patrol, local police, even civilian bands, all broadcasting the same thing. A child crying. Not screaming, not calling for help, just crying. The heartbroken, terrified sobbing of a child lost in the dark. It went on for 5 minutes, then stopped, then started again, slightly louder, then stopped, then started again. Even louder. The pattern continued for an hour. Each cycle, the crying got louder, more desperate, more impossible to ignore. I could see my hands shaking as I gripped my coffee mug. Every parental instinct, every protective urge was screaming at me to do something. Catherine came into the room, her face pale. "It's never done this before. Never been this coordinated, this aggressive. What's it trying to do? What it always does, trying to make us break the rules, trying to force a response." She grabbed my shoulder. "Daniel, no matter what happens, you don't go out there. You don't answer. You don't." The power went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. And through every radio, now distorted and crackling with interference, came a voice I recognized. My daughter's voice. "Daddy, Daddy, I'm scared. It's dark and I can't find the trail. Please come get me. Please, Daddy, I'm so cold." My daughter was in Missoula, safe at college, probably asleep in her dorm room. But the voice was perfect. Her voice exactly down to the slight rasp she got when she was crying. The way she'd called me Daddy instead of Dad when she was frightened. "Daddy, please, something's following me. I can hear it in the trees. Please hurry." I stood up, reached for my keys. Catherine blocked my way. "That's not your daughter. I know it's not. But what if?" "There's no what if. Call her right now. Call her and confirm she's safe." I pulled out my cell phone. No signal, of course, in. Oh, signal. We were being jammed somehow, isolated. "Then I'll drive to Missoula, check on her in person." "You'll drive 2 hours based on a voice on a radio. That's exactly what it wants. You leave, something happens here, we're understaffed. Someone else has to break protocol." Catherine's voice was firm. "We call the Missoula police. Have them do a welfare check." We followed the procedures. She was right. I knew she was right. But listening to my daughter's voice begging for help while I stood there doing nothing felt like dying. Catherine got on the landline, still working, and called Missoula PD, asked them to send an officer to my daughter's dorm, check on her, have her call me. The officer on the line sounded confused but agreed. 20 minutes later, my cell phone rang. Somehow, signal was back. "Dad," my actual daughter's voice, groggy with sleep. "Why did campus police just knock on my door at 1:00 a.m.? They said you requested a welfare check." The relief was overwhelming. "Sorry, sweetie, we had a situation. I needed to make sure you were okay." "I'm fine, I was sleeping." "What kind of situation? Just work stuff. Go back to bed. I love you." "Love you too, Dad. You're weird." She hung up. I sat down, suddenly exhausted. Through the radio, her voice, the other voice, the one that wasn't really her, let out a sound that might have been laughter or might have been wind through trees or might have been something else entirely. Then silence. The power came back on. The radios went quiet. The interference cleared. Catherine sat across from me, close one, too close. My hands were still shaking. It knew. It knew exactly which voice would break me. And now it knows it didn't work. It'll try something else next time, something worse. She looked tired, decades of this job showing on her face. "This is escalating. It's been building towards something for weeks now. The equipment failures, the phantom locations, the coordinated radio assault. It's testing our defenses, looking for weaknesses toward what? I don't know, but I think we're going to find out soon." She was right. 3 days later, Travis Hoffman didn't show up for his shift. We called his cell. No answer. Drove to his cabin outside Kalispell, empty. His truck was there, his gear was there, but no Travis. Then at 12:03 a.m. his voice came over the radio. "This is Ranger Hoffman. I need backup at Kinta Lake. I've got a situation here, multiple injuries, send everyone." Catherine grabbed the radio. "Travis, what's your status? Are you injured?" "Negative, I'm fine, but I've got 7 hikers here trapped by avalanche debris. 3 of them are critical. I need medical evac and additional personnel. This is a real emergency." "Confirm your location. Kintla Lake North Shore, approximately 2 mi from the ranger station. Please hurry." Catherine looked at me. "Kintla Lake Ranger Station has been closed since October. Snow's too deep to access and there hasn't been any avalanche activity reported in that area. So it's not really him or it is him and he's already been taken. Either way, we don't respond until daylight." I felt sick saying it. If Travis was really out there, really hurt, we were abandoning him. The voice on the radio, Travis's voice, continued for hours. Begging, pleading, describing injuries in medical detail, giving GPS coordinates, doing everything possible to compel a response. We logged it all, documented everything, and waited for dawn. At first light, Catherine and I took a helicopter to Kinta Lake. The area was buried under 6 ft of snow. No recent avalanche activity, no tracks, no sign of human presence. We checked the coordinates Travis's voice had given. Nothing there but pristine snowpack and frozen trees. We never found Travis Hoffman. His voice still calls sometimes, usually on nights when we're short-staffed, when the weather is worst, when conditions are perfect for an accident to happen to anyone responding. After that, we instituted new protocols. Mandatory buddy system for all patrols. No one works alone ever. Check-ins every 2 hours. If anyone misses a check-in, we send a team at dawn, not before. Cold but necessary. The strange thing is visitor disappearances haven't increased. Whatever's out there seems to focus almost exclusively on us. The rangers, the people who know about it, the ones who enforce the boundaries, like it's personal. Like we're not just prey but opponents in some long game we don't fully understand. Catherine retired last year, moved to Arizona, somewhere flat and empty where the forests can't hide anything. Before she left, she gave me her annotated maps, her journals, decades of observations. "It's your job now," she said. "Train the new rangers, teach them the rules, keep people alive as best you can." She paused at her truck, looking back at the mountains. "And Daniel, don't stay too long. This job, it costs more than they pay. I've given it 30 years. Don't give it any more than you have to. I'm still here, still following. The rules. Still listening to midnight calls from voices that shouldn't exist, from people who are dead or missing or were never real to begin with. And every night I wonder if tonight will be the night that something happens I can't ignore. The emergency I can't walk away from, the voice I can't resist, because they're patient. They're learning. And eventually they'll find the exact right combination of circumstances. The perfect voice. The one situation I won't be able to turn away from. That's when the rules will break. That's when someone else will become the voice on the radio calling for help that will never come. Catherine's retirement left a hole in the department that went beyond just losing experience. She'd been the institutional memory, the one who kept the unofficial records, who knew which areas were truly dangerous versus just difficult. Her replacement was a man named Derek Bishop, transferred from Yellowstone. Excellent credentials, but completely unprepared for what he was walking into. I tried to brief him, sat him down his first week, explained the rules, showed him Catherine's maps and journals. He listened politely, asked reasonable questions, and I could see in his eyes he thought I was either exaggerating or suffering from some kind of collective delusion. "I appreciate the local knowledge," he said when I finished, "but I've been doing this work for 20 years across 5 different parks. Every region has its stories. Usually there's a rational explanation once you dig into it. These aren't stories. These are documented incidents, documented by who? Rangers who were alone under stress in extreme conditions." He said it gently, not condescending, but I could hear the skepticism. "I'm not saying people haven't disappeared. I'm not saying the wilderness isn't dangerous, but voices on radios, things that wear human faces. That sounds like a combination of equipment malfunction, wildlife encounters, and psychological stress. So, what's your explanation for Travis Hoffman?" Honestly, he probably had a breakdown, left on his own, maybe got disoriented, fell through ice, any number of tragic but natural explanations. Derek stood up, signaling the conversation was over. "I'll follow your protocols because they're established procedure, but I won't perpetuate supernatural explanations when we should be looking for practical solutions." I wanted to argue, but what could I say? That I'd seen things that defied explanation. That would just confirm his suspicions about stress and delusion. So I nodded, wished him luck, and made sure I kept detailed notes on everything. When something happened, and I knew it would, there would be a record. It took 3 weeks. Derek was working a solo patrol near the South Fork of the Flathead River, technically against the new buddy system protocols, but he'd argued he needed to assess the region firsthand to understand the terrain. He'd promised to check in every hour. His last check-in came at 10:47 p.m., then silence. At midnight, his radio came to life. "This is Ranger Bishop. I've located an injured hiker near Spotted Bear. Male, approximately 30 years old. Possible spinal injury from a fall. I need medical helicopter and backup. Coordinates following." I grabbed the radio. "Derek, confirm you're calling from Spotted Bear area." "Affirmative, I'm with the victim now. He's conscious but in severe pain. Says he fell about 40 ft. We need that evac ASA." Everything about the call sounded legitimate. Professional tone, clear information, reasonable emergency. But it was after midnight, and Derek's voice had a quality I'd learned to recognize. Too perfect, too calm. Like someone reciting lines rather than experiencing the stress of a real emergency. "Derek, I need you to confirm your identity. What was the last thing we talked about before you left on patrol?" Pause. Then we discussed the route I'd be taking. You gave me the updated weather forecast. Why are you asking this? That was true. We had discussed those things. But I'd also made a point of telling him about my daughter's upcoming birthday. Had asked if he had kids. Small talk. The kind of personal detail you don't think about, but that sticks in memory. Derek, do I have kids? Another pause, longer this time. I don't. We've discussed a lot. I need to focus on this patient right now. Are you sending the helicopter or not? Negative. We'll send a team at first light. First light. This man could die by first light. The voice was rising now, frustration bleeding through. I'm ordering you to send medical evacuation immediately. You're not in a position to order anything. And if you were really Derek Bishop, you'd know I told you about my daughter's birthday yesterday. You'd know I asked if you had kids. You'd know you showed me pictures of your twin sons. Silence. Then the voice changed. Still Derek's voice, but the inflection shifted, became something else entirely. Oh, Daniel, you're getting better at this game. Catherine Train. Ed, you well. The thing wearing Derek's voice laughed, but you know what? It doesn't matter because Derek really is out here and he really did find someone. And by dawn, when you finally send your team, it's going to be far too late to help either of them. The radio went dead. I immediately called for a full response team. Every available ranger, search and rescue, the county sheriff, but nobody was going in until daylight. We staged at the Spotted Bear Ranger Station. Tried to stay warm. Tried not to think about what might be happening to Derek in the darkness. First light came at 6:43 a.m. We went in hard and fast. 2 teams fully equipped, constant radio contact with base. The coordinates the voice had given us led to a clearing about 3 mi from where Derek's truck was parked. We found Derek Bishop sitting against a tree, alive but catatonic. His eyes were open, tracking movement, but he didn't respond to questions. Didn't seem to recognize us. No physical injuries we could see, but when we checked his vitals, his heart rate was through the roof. 190 beats per minute, like he'd been sprinting for hours. 20 yards from Derek, we found the injured hiker. It was a mannequin, an old department store mannequin partially buried in the snow, positioned to look like someone who'd fallen. But the positioning was wrong in ways that made my skin crawl. Limbs bent at angles that were almost right but subtly off. Like whoever placed it had a good understanding of human anatomy but no instinctive feel for how bodies actually arrange themselves, and carved into the tree above the mannequin. In letters 6 in high were words. He stayed past midnight. He broke the rules. Now he's ours. We got Derek to a hospital in Kalispell. The doctors found nothing physically wrong. No head trauma, no toxins in his system, no medical explanation for his condition. Psychiatrists diagnosed him with a severe dissociative disorder, but they couldn't explain what triggered it. He never spoke again, never wrote anything down, never communicated in any way, just sat in his hospital room staring at nothing, occasionally making sounds that the nurses said sounded like wind through trees. The administration wanted to shut down the whole operation, declare the region too dangerous for routine patrols, limit access, maybe even close some areas entirely. But that would mean acknowledging why. And nobody was ready to put supernatural entities in an official report. So they compromised. Increased funding for technology, better radios, satellite phones, GPS tracking on all vehicles, mandatory 2-person teams, no exceptions, reduced patrols in the red dot zones, more training on stress management and psychological resilience. All useful measures, none of them addressing the actual problem. I was promoted to Catherine's old position, senior ranger for the region. With the promotion came access to files I hadn't seen before. Incident reports going back to the 1930s, witness statements, medical records, and most disturbing photographs. Dozens of photographs taken at incident sites over the decades. Most showed nothing unusual, just forest, snow, normal wilderness scenes. But in some of them, if you looked carefully, you could see things in the background. Figures that were almost human, trees that seemed to be watching, shadows that fell in wrong directions. And in several photos from different decades, different locations, I saw the same face, a woman always at the edge of the frame, always slightly out of focus. She wore different clothes depending on the era. 1940s dress, 1960s hiking gear, 1990s outdoor wear, but the face was identical. And in every photo, she was looking directly at the camera. I showed the photos to an elderly ranger who'd worked the region in the 1970s, a man named Eugene Winters, now in his 80s, living in a nursing home in Great Falls. "Oh, I remember her," he said, studying the photographs. "We called her the Walker. She'd show up at incident sites, always after something bad happened, never close enough to approach, never speaking, just watching." He handed the photos back. Story was she'd been a ranger herself back in the territorial days before Montana was a state. Got lost on patrol, was found 6 months later alive but wrong. Spoken languages nobody knew. Could navigate the forest perfectly in complete darkness. Didn't seem to feel cold or pain. They tried to reintegrate her, but she'd disappear for months at a time, then reappear at random. Eventually, they stopped trying to contain her. She just became part of the landscape. You think she's still out there? I know she is. I saw her myself in '74, right after we lost a ranger in the Bob Marshall. She was standing on a ridge about a mile away, perfectly motionless, watching us search. I looked away for a second, looked back, and she was gone. He leaned forward. "But here's the thing, son. I don't think she's dangerous. I think she's like us, trying to maintain the boundaries, keep things contained, except she's been doing it longer and knows more about what we're dealing with. How do I find her? You don't. She finds you. If she thinks you need to know something, she'll make contact. Until then, you just do your job and follow the rules." I left the nursing home with more questions than answers, but Eugene's words stayed with me. She's been doing it longer and knows more. 2 months later, I was working a daytime patrol near the Chinese wall when I saw her. She was standing on a rock outcropping about 200 yd away, wearing modern hiking clothes, looking exactly like the woman in the photographs. When our eyes met, she gestured. A simple motion, beckoning me to follow, then turned and walked into the trees. Every instinct said this was a trap, but it was daytime. I had full comms, and something about the encounter felt different from the midnight calls. This felt like an invitation rather than a lure. I followed, keeping my distance, maintaining sight of her as she moved through the forest with impossible ease, never breaking stride despite the rough terrain. After about a mile, she stopped in a small clearing and waited. As I approached, I got my first clear look at her face. She appeared to be in her 30s with features that suggested native heritage, though her eyes were wrong. Too pale, too reflective, like an animal's taped lucidum catching light even in daylight. "You're the Walker," I said. She smiled, but it was a sad expression. "Is that what they're calling me now? I've had many names. Most of them I've forgotten." Her voice sounded normal human, but there was an echo to it, like she was speaking from the bottom of a well. "What are you?" "The same thing you'll become if you stay here long enough. The same thing we all become if we give ourselves to the forest completely." She gestured around us. "This place is older than humans, Daniel Frost. Older than any living thing currently walking on Earth. What you call Montana is built on layers and layers of previous worlds, previous ecosystems, previous forms of life. And in certain places, those layers are thin, permeable. The red dot zones. Yes, places where the boundaries break down, where things that should be separate can interact." She walked to a fallen tree and sat. "The entities you've been experiencing, the midnight voices, the mimics, the things that wear familiar faces, they're refugees, survivors of those previous worlds, trapped between states of existence, trying desperately to return to physical form by taking over humans by any means necessary. They're not evil any more than a drowning person is evil for pulling others down in their panic. They're terrified and alone, and have been for longer than your species has existed." Her eyes met mine, but their desperation makes them dangerous. And they're learning, adapting. Each encounter teaches them more about how to manipulate humans, how to exploit your psychology, your emotions, your instincts. How do we stop them? You can't stop them. You can only contain them, keep people away from the thin places, don't respond to the lures, maintain the boundaries. She stood. "That's what I do. That's what I've been doing for longer than I can remember. And that's what you'll do if you last." "Eugene said you were a ranger, that you got lost and came back wrong." Eugene remembers wrong, but not entirely. "I was never a ranger. That profession didn't exist yet when I made my choice. but I was someone who tried to help people in the wilderness. And yes, I got lost. And yes, I came back wrong. She looked at her hands. But I also came back with understanding, with knowledge of how to navigate between worlds. I gave up my humanity to become something that could protect others from what's out here. Is that what happened to Derek Bishop? Is he becoming like you? Her expression darkened. No, Derek's mind broke. He touched something his psychology couldn't process and it shattered him. He'll never recover. That's the risk you all take. Exposure to things your human minds aren't equipped to handle. She moved closer. You're stronger than Derek, smarter, more flexible in your thinking, but you're not invulnerable. Nobody is. Eventually, everyone breaks or transforms. Those are the only two outcomes for people who do this work long enough. Then why keep doing it? Because if we don't, the boundaries collapse entirely. The thin places spread. More and more people stumble into situations they can't survive. What you're managing now, the midnight calls, the occasional disappearance, that's containment working. Without people like us maintaining that containment, it would be hundreds of disappearances, thousands. She started walking away. Follow the rules, Daniel Frost. Teach them to others. And when the time comes that you can't do this anymore, walk away. Don't make my mistake. Don't stay so long that you become something else entirely. Wait, how do I contact you if I need help? She looked back over her S. Hooder, you don't. I'll know when you need me. The forest tells me everything. Then she was gone, not gradually disappearing into trees, but simply gone between one moment and the next, like she'd never been there at all. I stood in that clearing for a long time trying to process what I'd learned. The thing masquerading as Sarah Mitchell wasn't just a predator. It was a refugee from a dead world drowning in non-existence, grasping at any chance to return to form. That didn't make it less dangerous. If anything, desperation made it more unpredictable, but it changed my understanding of what we were dealing with. I hiked back to my truck, checked in with dispatch, continued my patrol, but everything felt different now. The forest felt different, like I'd been given glasses that showed me what was really there, and now I couldn't unsee it. That night, alone in the ranger station, I updated Catherine's maps with my own observations, added notes about the walker, about what she told me, about the nature of what we were containing, and I made a decision. I'd give this job 5 more years. No more. 5 years to train new rangers, to pass on the knowledge, to help maintain the boundaries. Then I'd walk away, retire to somewhere flat and empty like Catherine had. Somewhere I could pretend the world made sense again because the walker was right. Stay too long and you either break or transform. Those were the only options, and I'd seen what breaking looked like. I wasn't ready to find out what transformation required. The encounter with the walker changed everything, not the job itself. The patrols continued. The midnight calls persisted. The rules remained the same, but my understanding of why we followed those rules, what we were actually protecting people from, that fundamental shift colored every decision I made afterward. I became obsessive about documentation. Every incident, every anomaly, every strange call got logged in detail. I created a database that cross-referenced locations, times, environmental conditions, phases of the moon, solar activity, anything that might reveal patterns. If this was containment work, I wanted to understand what we were containing. Patterns emerged. The midnight calls spiked during new moons and during geomagnetic storms. The red dot zones showed measurable electromagnetic anomalies, not huge, but consistent, like something was generating or disrupting local magnetic fields. Missing persons cases clustered around areas where multiple watersheds converged, or where geological surveys showed unusual mineral deposits, particularly uranium and rare earth elements. Most disturbing, the phenomenon was spreading slowly but measurably. Areas that had been safe 10 years ago were now showing red dot characteristics. The boundaries were expanding or weakening or both. I brought my findings to the new regional director, a woman named Angela Torres, who'd been brought in specifically to modernize our operations after Derek Bishop's incident. She listened to my presentation, studied my maps and data, then sat back in her chair. "This is thorough work," she said, "but I'm not sure what you want me to do with it." We can't close off a quarter of the state based on electromagnetic readings and historical incident rates. I'm not asking you to close anything. I'm asking for resources to study this properly. Partner with universities. Get geologists and physicists out here. Try to understand what's actually happening. And tell them what that we're investigating supernatural phenomena. She shook her head. Daniel, I appreciate your dedication, but this department is already under scrutiny after Derek's breakdown. The last thing we need is to start sounding like we believe in ghost stories. These aren't ghost stories. These are documented. They're unexplained incidents, which means we need better training, better equipment, better mental health support, not paranormal investigations. She softened her tone. I'm approving increased funding for support systems, mandatory counseling, more frequent rotations out of isolated postings, buddy systems strictly enforced. That's how we keep our rangers safe, not by chasing electromagnetic anomalies. I left her office frustrated but not surprised. The administration would never officially acknowledge what was happening. That meant containment would continue to be informal, dependent on individual rangers passing knowledge to each other, following rules that existed nowhere in official policy. Winter settled in hard. By January, we had record snowfall, and most of the back country became inaccessible except by snowmobile or skis. Visitor traffic dropped to nearly nothing. It should have been our quietest season. Instead, the midnight calls intensified. They came every night now, sometimes a dozen in a single shift. Different voices, different emergencies, but always between midnight and 4:00 a.m. We logged them all, ignored them all, and tried not to think about what might happen if even one of them was legitimate. Then came the night of February 8th. I was at the main station with two other rangers, a veteran named Paul Hendris and a rookie named Lisa Chen who just finished her first season. We were playing cards, drinking coffee, waiting for our shift to end at 6:00 a.m. At 11:47 p.m. Lisa's phone rang. She answered it, then went pale. It's my brother. He says he's lost in the forest near Hungry Horse Reservoir. He drove up to do some night photography and his truck got stuck. Now he can't find his way back. Where's your brother supposed to be tonight? I asked. Home in Bozeman. He's a grad student. He has classes tomorrow. She was already pulling on her coat, but that's his voice. That's definitely him. He sounds terrified. Lisa, don't. She was out the door before I could finish running for her truck. Paul and I exchanged looks and followed. Couldn't let her go alone. Not after midnight, not into a potential lure. Lisa, wait, I caught up to her at the parking lot. Call him back. Call his actual cell phone, not the number that just called you. I tried. It went straight to voicemail. Then call his roommate. Call someone who can verify where he actually is. She hesitated, pulled out her phone, dialed. We waited in the cold while it rang. Hey, Jake, it's Lisa. Is my brother there? Can you? She stopped. He's not. When did he leave? Okay, thanks. She lowered the phone, her face stricken. He left 3 hours ago, told his roommate he was driving to Hungry Horse Reservoir to photograph the aurora. Jake tried to talk him out of it because of the weather, but he went anyway. My stomach dropped. This was it. The perfect scenario. A real person really in danger calling at the worst possible time under conditions designed to make us doubt it was real. What do we do? Paul asked quietly. I pulled out my radio, called dispatch. This is Ranger Frost. We have a potential legitimate emergency. Requesting helicopter support, search and rescue, everything available, but nobody goes in until first light. That's 6 hours from now. Lisa said he could die from exposure in 6 hours, and we could all die in the next hour if this is a trap. But what if it's not? What if he really needs help and we let him freeze because we're following some superstitious rules? Tears were streaming down her face now. He's my brother. He's my only family. I can't. Her phone rang again, same number. She answered it on speaker. Lisa, her brother's voice weak now, shaking with cold. Please come. I'm so cold. I can't feel my hands anymore. There's something in the trees. It keeps getting closer. Please, Lisa, please. Then another sound, a wet tearing noise and screaming that cut off abruptly. Then silence. Lisa ran for her truck. Paul and I physically restrained her. We go. He needs help. He's dying. If we go now, we all die, I said, hating every word. We wait for dawn. We go in with full support. That's how we save people. There won't be anything to save by dawn. She was fighting us, genuinely fighting, and Paul was a big guy, but she was desperate and strong. You're killing him. You're killing my brother. Paul's radio crackled. We all froze. This is Hungry Horse Dam security. We have a situation. Young man just stumbled into our facility. Says he got lost in the woods trying to photograph the aurora. Requesting medical assistance for hypothermia. I grabbed the radio. Can you describe him? Asian male, early 20s, glasses. U of Montana jacket, says his name is David Chen. His sister's a ranger, wants us to call her. Lisa stopped fighting, stared at the radio. That's him. That's my brother. He's safe, I said. He found his way to the dam. He's okay. She sank to her knees in the snow, sobbing with relief. Paul and I stood there watching the forest, listening to the wind. From deep in the trees came a sound that might have been wind and might have been laughter and might have been something else entirely. They'd learned. They knew Lisa's brother was out there, knew his voice, knew how to perfectly simulate a scenario that would force us to break the rules, and they'd almost succeeded. The only reason it failed was pure luck. David stumbling onto the dam facility instead of getting genuinely lost. I helped Lisa to her feet, got her inside, made her coffee while we waited for confirmation that her brother was okay. He was mild hypothermia, some frostbite on his toes, but he'd survive. The dam security team drove him to the hospital, and Lisa met him there. But the incident shook all of us. The things in the forest were evolving their tactics faster than we could adapt. They'd moved from simple mimicry to complex psychological manipulation based on real-time intelligence. How long before they achieved something even more sophisticated? The next morning, I drove to Eugene Winter's nursing home. The old ranger was in his usual chair by the window, staring out at the flat, safe land. "Escape. They almost got one last night," I said, sitting beside him. "I heard word travels." He didn't look away from the window. "You want to know if it's getting worse? If you're losing the containment, am I?" "Yes." Simple, direct. Been watching these patterns for 60 years. It comes in cycles. Periods of intense activity followed by quiet periods. But each active cycle is worse than the last. More sophisticated attacks, more aggressive recruitment, wider geographical spread. He finally turned to look at me. "The Walker told you these things are refugees from dead worlds, right? Trying to claw their way back to existence." "Yes." "Well, here's what she didn't tell you, or maybe doesn't know herself. There's more of them now than there used to be. A lot more. Like something's opened up, some barriers come down, and they're flooding through in numbers we've never dealt with before." He leaned forward. "Your 5-year plan. Might want to make it 3 because I don't think this job is going to be survivable much longer. If it gets that bad, we'll have to tell people the truth, officially acknowledge what's happening. And then what? Mass panic, people avoiding the wilderness entirely, or worse, thrill-seekers deliberately going into the red zones trying to have encounters." Eugene shook his head. "The containment works because it's quiet. The moment you make it public, everything breaks." He was right, but I hated it. We were caught between impossible choices. Maintain the lie and watch people disappear, or tell the truth and watch the situation spiral into chaos. 3 months later, I made my decision. I'd been at the job for 18 years total, 14 years since that first encounter with Sarah Mitchell's voice. I'd trained dozens of rangers, updated protocols, maintained the boundaries as best I could. But Eugene was right. It was getting worse. The red dot zones were spreading. The midnight calls were becoming more convincing, and I could feel something in myself starting to crack. The same fault lines I'd seen in Derek Bishop before he broke entirely. I put in for retirement, bought a small house in Billings, flat, empty, far from any serious wilderness. Put my affairs in order. On my last night at the ranger station, I was alone packing up my office when the Walker appeared. Not outside, not calling me to the forest, just standing in the doorway like a normal visitor. "You're leaving," she said. "I lasted longer than most. You did good work, trained good people. Some of them will carry on." She moved into the room, studying the maps on my walls. "But you're right to leave. I can see it in you, the erosion. Stay much longer and you'll break or transform. Better to walk away while you're still mostly yourself. Will you keep watching, keep helping? I'll do what I can, but I'm not unlimited, Daniel. I can't be everywhere. The boundaries are failing in too many places." She met my eyes. Something's changed in the last decade, something fundamental. I don't know if it's human activity, climate change, electromagnetic pollution, all the ways you've altered the planet, or if it's a natural cycle, but the barriers between worlds are breaking down faster than they ever have. Is there any way to stop it? Stop it. Number slow it down. Maybe if humanity took the warning seriously. If people stopped pushing into the deep wilderness, if we could depopulate the red zones, let them return to true wildness. She shook her head, but that won't happen. So the containment will keep eroding until one day it fails completely. And then she didn't finish. What happens then? Then the forests reclaim what they've been patient about for a very long time. Not with violence, not with war, just with quiet, persistent dissolution of the boundaries between what should be separate. She turned to leave. Enjoy your retirement, Daniel Frost. You've earned it. But don't completely forget what you learned here, because geography won't protect you forever. Eventually, there won't be anywhere that's truly safe. She walked out and I heard her footsteps fade down the hallway. When I checked, there was no one there. I finished packing, said goodbye to the night shift rangers, and drove away from the station for the last time. In my rear view mirror, the mountains receded into darkness. Somewhere in those mountains, things that shouldn't exist were calling for help in voices they'd stolen from the dead. Rangers were following the rules, maintaining the boundaries, buying humanity a little more time. But the walker was right. The barriers were failing. What we'd contained for generations wouldn't stay contained much longer. That was 5 years ago. I'm living in Billings now, working security at a community college, trying to pretend I had a normal career in normal wilderness work. But I still monitor the reports, still track the incidents. The red dot zones have expanded by 15% since I left. 3 more rangers have disappeared. The midnight calls are being reported as far east as the Dakotas as far south as Wyoming. Whatever's spreading from Montana's deep wilderness isn't staying contained. And sometimes late at night, my old radio, which I kept, which I know I shouldn't have kept, crackles to life, even though it's turned off. Voices I recognize call my name. Voices from rangers who disappeared years ago, from that first encounter with Sarah Mitchell, from people I knew and couldn't save. They're patient, they're learning, and they know where I am. Last week I got a call from the current senior ranger for the region, a young woman I'd trained named Amanda Ree. She wanted advice about an incident near Glacier. I told her what I could, reminded her about the rules, wished her luck. Before we hung up, she said, "Daniel, the red zones are getting bigger, and we're running out of rangers who believe in the rules. New administration thinks it's all superstition, wants to cut the protocols, increase access to generate more revenue." I don't know how much longer we can hold this. I didn't have an answer for her, still don't. The truth is, the containment was always temporary, a holding action by dedicated people against forces we barely understood. We bought time, decades of time, but time runs out eventually. I still have Catherine's maps, still have my logs and Eugene's notes and the walker's warnings. Sometimes I think about writing it all down, creating a record for whoever comes after, whoever has to deal with what we couldn't contain. But who would believe it? Who would read a story about voices in the wilderness? About things that wear familiar faces, about refugees from dead worlds trying to claw their way back to existence, and think it was anything more than creative fiction? You would maybe, if you've read this far, if you felt that crawling unease that comes from recognizing truth in impossible stories. So here's what I'll tell you. If you're ever in Montana's back country, follow the posted regulations. Don't go into closed areas. Don't hike alone. And if you're in the wilderness after midnight and you hear someone calling for help, someone who sounds terrified, who sounds like they're dying, who sounds like someone you know, don't answer. Don't go looking. Wait for dawn, because the rules exist for a reason. Rangers died learning them. We maintained them for as long as we could. And if you ignore them, you become just another voice on the radio calling for help that will never come, used by something ancient and desperate to lure the next victim. That's the job nobody tells you about. That's the truth behind the missing person statistics, the unexplained disappearances, the stories of people who walked into the forest and never came back. We tried to protect you. We followed the rules. We maintain the boundaries, but those boundaries are failing, and soon you'll have to follow the rules yourself. My name was Daniel Frost. I was a ranger with Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks for 18 years. I followed the rules and I survived. Learn from that because the midnight calls are spreading, and eventually one of them will be for you.